Welcome, everybody. This is AllMinucOne. My name is Bill. If you enjoy this kind of content, please like, share, and subscribe. So today, I want to talk about this continuing series that I've been doing on fear and what we should truly be afraid of in our current times. Now, today's going to be the last episode of this little series that I'm doing because I want to move back into political philosophy, history, and what it means and how to create a robust society. So, let's get into it. So, from Anne Miles Chong, everyone, you should really if you are on Twitter, you may be a passive user like I am, but check him out if you want to know what's going on. He does a very good job. One of the things, the best things that you can do is use certain people as news aggregates for you to point you in the proper direction so you can see what's really going on. Because most likely the mainstream media is not going to tell you what is actually going on. They're going to politicize everything. So this first article here he has brought up, I'm going to get to in a second. But if you scroll down a little bit, you can see he has some other things. And this most atrocious thing where a man shot a 5-year-old boy. I'm not going to get into that article, but this is the kind of stuff that is happening in our society today based on ridiculous narratives of oppression and ideas that the black community is being oppressed or suppressed despite their own actions. And again, when I say that broadly, the black community I don't think is any sort of monolith whatsoever. I'm not Joe Biden. Here we have that the Seattle police chief, she resigned, which good for her because she was in an unworkable situation. He just posts so much stuff. If you want to see videos of rioting from Chicago the other day, there's that. Here's the DC Police Department. Yesterday the White House had shots fired. So again, all kinds of good stuff just for a news aggregate. So, from the Post-Millennial, this says Antifa uses its leaderlessness to gaslight public and officials into believing it doesn't exist. Now, they've been saying this. This was just today that this was released. They have been saying this for a very long time. I remember having a discussion with my sister a month or more ago when we had some other family in town, and she said, well, they're not even a group. They're not even organized. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course they are. Of course, I've been following this very closely for many years now, and I'm going to show you their operations in case you weren't aware. I mean, most of you, I would assume by this point, are aware. Antifa is not anti-fascist. They use the tactics of fascism. They think that anyone who is left of Mao is a fascist. They don't understand that fascists are themselves socialist. They are not free marketeers. They are not capitalist. But that doesn't matter because they are about gaining power and their cause. They're also a supremacist group. They are white supremacist. They feel guilty that they are racist, and therefore they prop up anything and everything that has to do with proper segregation in their minds, proper segregation, that is, and that we can allow these different groups to live by themselves, that we can't allow them to mix. It is literally no different than what Richard Spencer preaches, except for Richard Spencer just wants special protections for white people, for people of European descent. Antifa, on the other hand, wants special protections for, ethnic groups that are of a certain skin tone and anything that's not European, essentially. So these distinctions are very minor. They both want socialism. They both want a big, strong, centralized government. And they're essentially wanting the same thing. The difference is that guys like Richard Spencer aren't active attacking people in the street and don't have 6 years of or more of doing this. So real quick, let's read the first line or so of this. Antifa militants claim that they are part of a leaderless movement. this does everything to advance their cause while giving them the plausible deniability they need to engender progressive public support. And as I will often say, Yuri Bezmenov will call the people that support this useful idiots. He talked about this. He was a KGB agent. His job was propaganda and subversion. From the New York Post, Black Lives Matter organizers call for Chicago looting reparations. That was today. Let's just go and see what she had to say.
Care if somebody decides to loot a Gucci or a Macy's or a Nike, because that makes sure that that person eats. That makes sure that that person has clothes. That's reparations. That is reparations. Anything they want to take it, because these businesses have insurance. They're going to get their money back. My people aren't getting anything.
Your people. Well, I don't think that because you have some far distant common heritage that you are the same as every other black person. I get that black identity is very strong in the United States, but it is not reparations to steal from a store, to take from Gucci that might provide them food. How about getting a job? And I get that COVID's out there right now, and COVID is certainly an issue. And everything that we have done that is absolutely idiotic to allow all these people to be in this position. I covered that yesterday. So let's move on. From the Wall Street Journal, liberal cities, radical mayhem. Democratic mayors and governors seem unable to stop the destruction of their own cities. This was June 2nd, 2020. Now, they weren't unable, they were unwilling. And much of this is because of politics. So you, if you live in one of these cities, will suffer because of the politics of the Democratic Party wanting to pretend to be sympathetic to these radical leftists. And it is open now in the air that the Democrats are socialist. It is very open now. Bernie Sanders broke that seal. Bernie Sanders has had the support of Antifa. I will show you clips of that soon. And this growing movement has also been propped up by academia. Now, there's all kinds of stuff I could have brought up about this, but I'm only going to show you one little thing about that because it is very, very well known. Think, the number one book right now, I believe, is White Fragility, where an avowed racist, a white woman claiming that she is racist, says that all white people must be racist. What is this? Was this self-flagellation? Or is this, please don't hurt me? I don't know. I think what it really is brainwashing to invoke a communist utopian revolution. And it's not going to happen on my watch, people. You know, and I'm going to show you stuff, and perhaps if anybody sees this, you know, it might make me a target of these extreme leftist groups. I do not care because I will not live in fear, and neither should you. Do not live in fear and refuse. Never bend that knee. So here, this was from July 20th, 2017. This was in response to the riots in Sacramento in 2016, where Antifa showed up. It says Berkeley teacher charged with connection with riot at 2016 Sacramento rally. Now it says the veteran activist and Berkeley school teacher Yvette Ferlencia, has been charged with assault, participating in a riot, and inciting a riot for her actions in a face-off between white nationalist groups and counter-protesters in Sacramento last year. Now, it says she's a teacher at the Martin Luther King Middle School in Berkeley. This lady went out to go be in a dangerous assault of the extreme right-wingers, which, again, skinheads, Nazis, they're not right-wing. They're left-wingers. They are right of Mao. They are left of liberty. left of any sort of classical liberalism. They're left of American constitutionalism. They are a progressive movement. You have more in common with them, you commie scumbags, than you do with anybody like me who's classically liberal. Fox News, militant left-wing leader arrested for allegedly inciting violence at 2016 Sacramento melee. Now, you may have heard of the professor with the bike lock. I don't recall his name off the top of my head, but he was later on released. But these incidences go back. This is at least 4 years ago. There was more before that. This is from the New York Times. Now, I had to get this from Archive today because the New York Times has wants everyone to subscribe constantly, and I'm not doing that because, for the most part, they are a garbage paper. Anyways, Antifa grows as left-wing factions set to literally fight the far right. So this was August 17th, 2017. And this talks about white nationalists forgo clash on Saturday with counter-protesters, some of the members of the so-called Antifa movement in Charlottesville. Oakland, California, last weekend, when a 27-year-old bike messenger showed up at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, he came ready for battle. He joined a human chain and stretched in front of Emancipation Park to link arms with others, blocking waves of white supremacists, some of them in full Nazi regalia, from entering. Now, I have yet to see a picture of that. I was following this when it happened. Many of the alt-right or alt-light movements in the beginning of those days from 2015 onward, and then when this happened, were saying, stay away from Charlottesville. It's going to be bad. And by no means do I believe that there were not neo-Nazis there. There absolutely were. But I don't know about in full regalia. I don't know if I've seen pictures of that. And then we've been using this false narrative that Trump never condemned those people when he did. Most people don't listen. They don't read the transcripts. Maybe you remember this young lady who was deemed Moldy Locks. Moldy Locks was a member of Antifa fighting in these riots and was cold-cocked by a grown man because she doesn't understand that she is a small woman and men are going to be more powerful than her. It was a big meme for a long time. So, surprisingly, this is from August 19th, 2017. CNN did a little expose, and interestingly, they usually cover for these groups. So I'm going to play just a short little bit here, but they went inside to check them out.
Welcome back to The Lead, the national lead now. By most accounts, almost all of the people protesting against the hateful bigots, the Nazis and Klansmen in Charlottesville, were peaceful, but not all of them. In their midst was a sometimes very violent group of protesters that call themselves Antifa, known to not only clash with bigots, but also sometimes with police. And
now, see, what he just said there was exactly echoing what the president had said, but in reverse. He was saying some did this thing while others were peaceful. We don't hear about how Jake Tapper, though, is biased.
Occasionally storefronts. At least 2 journalists in Virginia were assaulted by violent counter-protesters over the weekend, including this cameraman from the Richmond CBS affiliate. CNN's Sarah Ganim now takes us inside Antifa and shows us this group like you've never seen it before.
They attack journalists quite often. Perhaps you've heard of Andy No. He was attacked by them because he lives in, I believe it's Seattle. I could be mistaken. Maybe it's Portland. But he lives in the area where they're most active, and he has continually exposed them, and they do not like him.
It's 6 a.m. in Portland, Oregon, and we're headed to a bar with blacked out windows.
They wanted to meet us really early in the morning because they're concerned about a lot of people being around.
We are meeting members of the Rose City Antifa, short for anti-fascist. This group's main goal is to disrupt neo-Nazis and white supremacists, but also take on government and capitalism.
Antifa is any group that's willing to stand up against fascists by any means necessary.
By any means necessary, they say, can mean outing a white nationalist at their work or to their neighbors. Or, as we've seen recently, violence, fires, property damage, hand-to-hand combat at protests across the country.
So, they are not anti-fascist, they are fascist. Here again, this is from Axios. September 1st, 2017, Feds sounded alarm on Antifa and 2016. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security have been warning state and local officials of violence coming from far-left anti-fascist groups for at least a year, including the potential of violence between those on the far right and the far left, per a new report. Department of Homeland Security formally classified Antifa activities as domestic terrorist violence, according to the confidential documents obtained. Interestingly, people are saying now that the president has claimed them as a domestic terrorist organization, as a terroristic organization, that this is all of a sudden and reactionary. Yet all the way back in 2016, the government was looking at this. Interesting, huh? Right? That right there is a picture of an terrorism unit that I was in and the military. I can tell you, I've been watching this. They are terrorists. They are here for political means. They are here to threaten you. They are here to take your way of life. And they just want power. That is all that they are, is a group wanting power. They're fighting over who will have the power. They are not so much anti-fascist as anti-capitalist, anti-freedom. Remember, if you do not kowtow, you do not bend the knee to the mob, you do not believe in what they say, they will beat you and potentially murder you. They will light your home on fire. They will burn down your businesses. They will do everything in their power to upend you. Politico, FBI, Homeland Security warn of more Antifa attacks. Well, that was September 2017. I'm just showing you this was covered. FBI, DHS warn of increasingly violent Antifa clashes, and 2016 documents show. September 3rd, 2017. The Hill, feds have warned about Antifa attacks since early 2016. They knew that this was coming. Here again from CNN, unmasking the leftist Antifa movement. This was from May 3rd, 2019, and it talks about a specific individual and why he started becoming an anti-fascist. Because Donald Trump was raised as the president. And this is how the media people calls these problems. You know, be afraid. Be concerned about Antifa. Be concerned about BLM. But be very concerned about the media and tech censorship manipulation. So perhaps you recall this one. This was September 15th, 2017. This is from NBC, the Bay Area. Cost of free speech at Berkeley is estimated at $600,000 to deal with protest as Ben Shapiro speaks. Now, if you recall, Berkeley at the time was a hotbed and no one could get in because Antifa kept threatening people's free speech. This was going on during the Donald Trump campaigning before he became the president. See, they don't like the left globalists. They don't like the neoliberals, but they know that they have allies on the left. And Donald Trump is basically a blue dog Democrat. He's like an old school Democrat. In fact, when he ran, I kind of like Jim Webb on the Democratic side, because Jim Webb was just a kind of common sense blue dog Democrat. I didn't think he was a globalist. There was a lot of stuff about him I thought was good, but he just didn't have the presence. And of course, there was the whole Hillary and the whole Sanders ordeal. And of course, Hillary, according to the DNC, just deserved to be the president for no other reason other than that she was a woman who had been in politics for a long time. That and she she basically was famous, right? It's about brand recognition. So this is from BBC Radio 4. So you could listen to this if you want, but I just want to show you again from the 27th of October 2017, and there's a little thing that goes along with this. So it goes along with the history here. 7 things you need to know about Antifa. How long have they been around? Some groups date back to the original movement to fighting against European fascists in the 1920s and 30s. Now, I did a whole thing on fascism. You can go back. This will be, I think, the 22nd video I've made. I've only been at this for a little bit. I did a whole thing on fascism. You can look at the origins of fascism. The origins of fascism are out of socialism. They are left-wing. It is still a centralized control government. It is not the same thing as free markets. It is not volunteerism. It is not libertarianism. It's not anarcho-capitalism. It is none of those things. It is not constitutionalism. It is a left-wing ideology with central state control meant to control the economy and the freedoms of the people. Exactly how communism works. That is, communism that has government backing, not the type where people do what they wish by going off and living in a commune. Of course, those usually end badly too. Just think about Jonestown. How do you pronounce Antifa? Yeah, whatever. What are they opposed to? Neo-Nazis, neo-fascism, white supremacists, and racism. And these days, the movement that encapsulates some of these big ideas, the alt-right. When I don't think the alt-right was that at all. Now, it was appropriated to be that, but that's not what people were saying originally. What the alt-right really was is because nobody was talking about immigration. They were talking about, maybe securing our borders. Because for a long time, the libertarian wing of the right was all about open borders and the global economy. Now, I'm kind of agnostic on the issue, not completely. I think we have a right to control our borders, but I think that the most important thing is maintaining our national sovereignty and control. Why do they dress all in black? Like other protester movements dating back to the Cold War era, they often dress in black, sometimes overlaying their face with masks or helmets, so they can't be identified in opposing groups known as a black bloc. What tactics do they use? Well, the tactics they use is terrorism, intimidation, fear, attacking old ladies. They have a long history of attacking old ladies, people in the street, random things. It's interesting when they get stood up to, most often, someone slams them on their face or puts a gun in their face, they freak out because they're a bunch of babies. They're a bunch of little kids LARPing, and they don't realize the realities of life. Most of them that we understand are middle class. They're middle class spoiled kids. How violent are they? Their willingness to use violence marks out Antifa from many other left-wing activists. Although the Antifa members we spoke with said they denounced the use of weapons and violence in direct action. Well, this just isn't right. Back in the Berkeley riots, I believe Steven Crowder had his producer infiltrate Antifa, and they actually did talk with the FBI about them. They were given weapons and everything else. These people are immoral people. They are the worst of the worst, and I don't mean in a Hillary Clinton type deplorable sense. I'm just saying that they don't care. If you don't believe what they believe, they will hurt you. And they do this because, as I have talked often before, they're not developed beings. They haven't developed their personalities. They've never accomplished anything. They're full of pain and hate and regret, and they unleash their shadow and project it upon the world, which is why they think everyone's a racist, because they themselves are racists. And it says, do women join? Yeah. Who cares? Of course they join. So, this group that apparently isn't organized has websites. It's going down. Author, 7 Hills, or Antifa of 7 Hills. Anti-Fascists of the 7 Hills is an organization to fight fascists in Richmond. That is Richmond, Virginia. We seek to combat fascism and communist and anarchist united and militant oppression or opposition. If you're an anarchist, you can't be a totalitarian, right? These people are totalitarian. They're not anarchists. They claim to be, but It's because they're morons and they don't know English. They don't understand English because they're all part of that postmodernist nonsense. Fascism seeks to reinforce white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism through recruitment. Fascism has nothing to do with capitalism. Fascism is not a capitalist system. Read The Vampire Economy. Read the writings of Mussolini, of Giovanni Gentili. Read what Hitler had to say. Read the 25 points of the Nazi Party of Germany. See Franco's Spain. You have no clue what you're talking about. You're just spewing propaganda. Mobilization and violence. We seek to combat efforts fighting fire with our fire. Well, I'm sorry, but the right is not out attacking people in the streets. They like to used to point to the Proud Boys, but the Proud Boys were using defensive violence and protecting people. I'm not really about creating gang violence in the streets. I think it's ridiculous. Same reason why I don't go out and protest, because I don't think that it accomplishes much of anything. It's just a bunch of people pretending like they're part of something, virtue signaling, and then they get lost in a mob mentality. It is how psychology, human psychology, works. And it takes a very strong person, a very developed person, not to be caught up into that sort of totalitarianism. And what happens is within that group, you lose your own identity, and that's exactly what they want. Because without a personal identity, without being individuated, you are susceptible to being sucked in to this group, and that just makes you a weapon for them, a useful idiot. So here's some columns this week in fascism: prison break, breakout. What was the one I wanted to? Resistance is life, an irregular dispatch on ongoing conditions of life in the heart of Rojava Revolution. Vandalism. Making Monsters. Making Monsters explores the intersections of wealth and power by looking at various contemporary examples of the billionaire class. Well, you know, billionaires happen to exist, and they're not all the worst people out there. They give people jobs. They provide us with things. So these people apparently aren't organized, but here's a meeting they had the other week, Tuesday, August 4th, 2 p.m. at Waycross, Georgia. This was at a state prison. If you remember, maybe you don't remember, I should have brought this up, but a while back, there was a group of Antifa members that were going after an immigration detention center and was throwing propane tanks and trying to light them, have them explode, potentially killing detainees. But again, these people aren't rational. They're trying to protect these people, free them, but they also don't really care if they put their lives in danger, right? So here, Saturday, August 15th, white supremacy counter rally. Well, who are the white supremacists? For more information, click here. Let's click there. Let's see where this takes us. On August 15th, a coalition of assorted white supremacists, neo-Nazis, neo-Confederates, 3% militias. By the way, the 3%ers have nothing to do racially. They're just people that have decided that they are going to protect the community or society against any sort of tyranny. Holding a Defend Stone Mountain. Join a coalition. So I knew nothing about these things, but this is going down. You want to say that these people aren't organized? Well, this is them organizing. This is from RVA magazine. Inside Seven Hills. Local activists organized nationwide Antifa or anti-fascist conference as anniversary of Charlottesville approaches. This was August 8th, 2018. So I'm not going to read all this. It just talks about Seven Hills Antifa, and I picked them because they were easy to pick. I'm aware of them. They're probably one of the larger chapters close to me. I don't live in Virginia, but close enough. Here is their Twitter page. So after all of the right-wingers get banned, here Antifa, who is literally violent, they're up here. Richmond Strike, who is protest security. Here's some. City of Chicago is rising all the bridges to downtown to keep people away from it. Just occurred to me how much we really do live under corporate feudalism. They turn the city centers into castles for the royalty where they can raise the drawbridges. We know it probably wouldn't happen if the town wasn't under siege by supposed anti-fascists from tyrannical communists in the streets. Counterinsurgency Field Manual. So you get the gist of the things that they are posting. Here is their official website. Fascist to ashes, dust to dust. Anti-Fascists of Seven Hills is an organization to fight fascist enrichment. We seek to combat fascism as anarchists and communists. You're not anarchists. You're tyrants. I'll tell you another thing. Richmond has a very, very, very large black population. I don't think that for a long time they had a high crime rate. I'm not saying that was due to their black population, but they did. I don't think that it is the most capitalistic hustle and bustle city in the United States. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been through there, but I'm not seeing that. They oppose capitalism, racism, yet they're racist themselves, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. Well, good for you. You know, oppose whatever you like to oppose. Doesn't mean you get to go out and beat people. So we therefore stand against politicians, NGOs, non-governmental organizations. That's interesting because they get a lot of money from NGOs, and the police, all of whom have vested interest in maintaining their structures of oppression. See, what they're really saying is we oppose all these people that have power and oppress you because we want to be the powers and oppressors. So real quick, let's listen to an interview with A.G. Barr from just the other day.
Institute, International Policy, about Antifa. I don't think people really understand Antifa. And they say empirical and anecdotal evidence shows that Antifa is in fact highly networked, well-funded, has a global presence. It is a flat organizational structure with dozens and possibly hundreds of local groups. And by the way, the oldest group is in Portland. They say Antifa's stated long-term objective, both in America and abroad, and it got its birth in Europe, England, then Germany, then the United States, is to establish a communist world order. And by the way, this information is put out. It's not like we're conspiracy theorists or so forth.
The communist world order. That means they are Bolsheviks, people. They're Stalinists. They want it to consume the world. And again, I will always state the reality. When you implement communism, there are basically have-nots, and then there are the haves. And it's far worse than any sort of mixed economy that we have now. I wish we didn't have a mixed economy. I wish we had a true free market in the United States. But we don't. But we still have a largely free market, despite the corporatism, which I do not like, despite the centralized bank, which I do not like. But these people, instead of gaining allies and reaching across the aisle, they just want to beat you over the head.
In the United States, Antifa's immediate aim is to bring down the demise of the Trump administration. It's an attack on capitalism. They say they're attacking fascism when they're Marxist fascists, such thing. To bring down the Trump administration. It's interesting that one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter said that one of her focuses is to bring down the Trump administration.
Because BLM is a communist organization. Their organizers, their founders, are admittedly communist. I did a video on that a few weeks back. And there's a long history of communist movements within the black community because the communists know how to organize people and how to weaponize such ridiculous ideas as race against people. If you want some information about that, some long ago history, look at Manning Johnson's book. What is it? Race, Color, and Communism.
What is it about the Trump administration that stands in their way?
Well, I think they would be, generally for bringing down any administration. They are a revolutionary group that is interested in some form of socialism, communism. They're essentially Bolsheviks. Their tactics are fascistic, and your description of them is consistent with what I've seen. With the Trump administration, a lot of it has been the demonization of the Trump administration from day one. I went back and I watched his victory speech after election night. People should go back and look at it. It was very measured. It was a very statesmanlike speech. He offered the olive branch. He praised Hillary Clinton, thanked her for all her service to the country, talked about working together to make things better for the American people. That was the day he won, and from that point forward, there's been the resistance. They were trying to impeach him from day one. They have done everything they can. They've shredded the norms of our system to do what they can to drive him from office or to debilitate his administration. And I think it's because of the desire for power, that the left wants power because that is essentially their state of grace and their secular religion. They want to run people's lives so they can design utopia for all of us, and that's what turns them on. And it's the lust for power, and they weren't expecting Trump's victory, and it outrages them.
In this document, this research, they talk about the roots of Antifa in the Baader-Meinhof gang in Germany and other really violent, radical organizations in the United States, similar to the Black Panthers, similar to the Weather Underground, except they're more networked, they're better organized.
Yep.
They seem to have more ammunition of sorts to use against police officers and so forth. And apparently they get a lot of their funding online. I have to believe that our agencies and so forth are really trying to construct some kind of scenario about what we're dealing with and how to undo this. Am I close?
It's a form of it's a new form of urban guerrilla warfare. Mao Zedong used to speak about the guerrilla being like fish swimming in the ocean, the way the guerrilla moves through the people. The guerrilla hides out among the people as a fish in the ocean. And what they do is they are essentially shielding themselves or shrouding themselves in First Amendment activity. They go into the demonstrations, which are exercising First Amendment activity.
Useful idiots.
And they insinuate themselves in there to shield themselves. That's where they swim. And what they do is they hijack these demonstrations and they provoke violence, and they have various tiers of people from the sort of top provocateurs down through people who are their minions and sort of run the violent missions. But it's a difficult phenomenon to deal with. They're highly organized at these demonstrations.
So everything that I've been talking about is exactly what A.G. Barr had just stated there. And the full interview is rather good, but the main thing that is very important that a lot of people have been talking about for a long time is the cult religious-like mentality. And so when you don't have your soul developed and you don't have a spiritual life, those are two different things. The soul and the spirit are not the same. You are a triune being. You have a soul, a body, and a spirit. Your spirit is like your attitude. Your soul is your essence. And the body is the place where those things are occupied, in short, at least. The problem is that these people have become, for the most part, atheists, and our society has done this as we have leaned towards more progressive ideologies. This has been happening since the days of the Jacobins. You have to understand that this this atheistic ideology means you have to replace God with something. Now, Nietzsche talked about this. So what are you going to replace it with? Well, you can replace it with the woke dynamics, as this article states. This is from New Discourses. This is an article by James Lindsay. If you're not aware of who James Lindsay is, I covered him a while back in a video I did. But him and Peter Boghossian and Heather Penrose did some academic chicanery where they submitted articles to academic journals knowing that they were absolutely ridiculous based on woke ideologies and knew that they would get published without any sort of real skepticism. And the most hilarious is they took a chapter of Mein Kampf, and instead of using Jew, they replaced the word with white male. And the feminists took it in. This tells you, the fact that even happened tells you where these people are at as far as their racial supremacy. And they are fascist within their own beliefs. They just deny it. But they're not united beings. They're not organized within themselves. They don't really know what they believe, which is why they follow things like postmodernism, which basically says that there is nothing real, there is no reality. Reality is subjective. There is no morality. There nothing exists except for Marx, who was a racist, by the way. Marx was definitely a racist. Anyways, so this was wrote on June 6, 2020. So it says, you must understand racism and admit that you cannot understand racism. That sounds like Newspeak to me, 1984. You must admit to your complicity in racism and pledge to do better, knowing that it is impossible to do better. You must be an ally, but accept that you will always do your allyship wrong, the cult dynamic of wokeness. Now, he took that from the White Fragility book, essentially, which is utter garbage, by the way. And you're a garbage person if you think that anything in there is good. You're basically just admitting that you judge people based on immutable characteristics. You think that your melanin somehow makes you an evil person or a good person, which is just absolute insanity. And you have no understanding of history or the development of societies or of any sort of, practical relations with people. So it talks about the initiation. I'm not going to read a lot of this, but I'm going to highlight some things. It says, one thing I learned through all the study is that the most fundamentalist religions and cult conversions, especially in adults, occur by using doctrine to resolve some core emotional vulnerability. This is exactly what I talk about not developing yourself. That is, cult doctrine, and I include extreme fundamentalist interpretations of religious doctrines as cultish, exists to resolve a particular powerful emotional vulnerability in an unhealthy way. The question is where that emotional vulnerability comes from, because with cults, it's always exploited. Sometimes the underlying emotional vulnerability is there for personal reasons or as a result of life events. People turn to various doctrines to explain and contextualize the major events in their lives or to understand who they are. Again, this can be healthy or unhealthy. Vulnerability is also often deliberately inflamed or manufactured for the purpose of doing a cult initiation. However, especially in unhealthy cases, would-be indoctrinators ask manipulative questions and try to catch people on the spot in a feeling of discomfort that is usually rooted in their morality and sense of being a good or adequate person. So Scientology does things like this. Lots of cults do this kind of stuff. There are many groups. Now, in a true sense of faith, religious sense, I would say it does none of this. all true faith does is give you a promise, or at least in a Christian context, give you a promise that if you yourself would clean up your life and dedicate it to the creator of the universe and serve him in such a way as to help your fellow man, that you have through Christ a promise of eternal life. And that's really all it comes down to. And then over time, actually, there is a thing that happens where your heart changes, the way you look at the world changes. Many, many, many things change with you. So again, this is a very, very long article. Let's read this real quick. The concept of white fragility in the anti-racist woke cult is exactly this sort of emotional shakedown. White fragility separates white people and their adjacencies into exactly two types: racist who admit it, and racist who are too emotionally fragile to admit it. It is obvious which side the cult doctrine favors. In fact, the cult doctrine in this case is that every white and white adjacent person is a racist by default. So the racists are racist towards white people. Right? And you can be racist towards your own ethnicity, people. Like, racism just, I know what the new woke word is, but I don't agree with that word because it's not used in common parlance that way. It is literally commie indoctrination. So I understand the power dynamic idea. That's stupid. It's just about supremacy. The word comes from racialism and has to do with which class of people do you think is superior or not. See, the old idea of racialism, of racism, is that certain people, certain ethnic groups are less evolved than others. And that is true in the sense that some cultures have evolved further than others, but I don't think that's true on a whole. And we know that by taking samples from across the world. We also cannot divide people into races so easily. I know a lot of people like to claim so, but that's not really true. There are many, many different genetic markers. If you look at blood type alone, eye color, hair color, different things like that, there are different tones to your skin. Skin tone most often is correlated with the latitude in which you live in. So if you're closer to the equator, no matter what ethnic group you belong to, you are going to have darker skin. It's how it works. If you live in arid desert climates, you are going to have darker skin. Those people also tend to develop more body hair because as that body hair wicks away the sweat, they cool, right? That's what sweat's for, is to cool you. People like me who have Northern European and Native American heritage, we have less body hair. It's how those things work. Anyways, it talks about the indoctrination, all kinds of stuff. This is a great article if you really, really want to get into the cult of wokeness. It says here, it talks about cult reprogramming. Once the mark is properly indoctrinated, the objective becomes to reprogram the mark to get them to think differently. The goal is no longer to indoctrinate on what is right think and wrong think. It is to make the mark's thinking be completely in line with the views of the world described by the cult doctrine. This will let the mark see the truth of the doctrine for themselves everywhere in the world. That's being woke. This is called brainwashing. That's what this is. Brainwashing. You don't think for yourself. You want to give up your individual self-being in order to become part of a group, a mob. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. This is from Russia, Russian faith, Christian Renaissance. This is a Eastern Orthodox article, and I happen to be sympathetic to the Eastern Orthodox Church because they are basically the only major church organization that has maintained their values and beliefs. The Southern Baptists have gotten very much into the woke scold and woke speak stuff. Not all of them, but a lot of them. The Roman Catholic Church, I think that the papacy is the harlot that rides the beast from Revelation, so that's a whole other issue. Just an opinion. Sorry, Catholics. But the Episcopals, the Lutherans, they have so many issues. Not to mention, and the Calvinists, they don't even believe in free will, and they think everything's predetermined. And in my opinion, they make God out to be an evil being, and that's what most people, when you talk to atheists and they think about God, they're preaching from a Gnostic, Calvinistic perspective. And I mean Gnosticism as in the true sense of the word, gnosis, to know. And what the Gnostics believed was that essentially, as long as you had the proper spiritual beliefs, right, you were good with God. Didn't matter what you did in your body. It's sort of like being woke. As long as you have the proper beliefs, you can be the trash of the earth. You can be a horrible person, but you're woke, so it's okay. Losing your soul to the crowd, the dangers of being politically correct. There is much fear within politically correct movements. It is the same fear which grips party comrades and any despotic regime, governed by the understanding that a false move or opinion can get them expelled. Once you've met one communist official, you've more or less met them all. There is also great courage and bravery in circles where the slightest sign of dissent carries enormous risk. That's absolutely right. When people start pouring their lives on to the record, the temptation is to self-censor according to the sensibilities of those around them. The result is ever narrowing parameters of acceptable thought, and one suspects possible fault. So this was written June 25th. Now, this is like if I'm talking to a feminist, I know exactly what she's thinking and what she believes and whatever else. Now, there are a lot of women that will differentiate within that movement, but look at J.K. Rowling, who claims to be a feminist, and now she's getting the woke scold from those people because she claims that trans women aren't actual women, and they're not. Sorry, people, they're not. Just because you had a surgery does not make you genetically a different being. It doesn't mean I won't be respectful toward you either. It says, God forbid that we should ever see a Christian Lives Matter movement. What faster way to rob people of their temporal and spiritual salvation than to encourage them to sublimate their identity into that of a political movement? It is bad enough to hold your prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude accountable to a congregation. But now imagine a church governed by only its congregation, perhaps with a bit of sinister guidance from the media and intrinsic commercial interests. This is pretty sharp, I'll tell you. Suddenly the individual is prostrated before 1,000 desperate hot-button issues, feeling their own identity under attack when someone else's altarpiece is desecrated. To question the purity of anyone else's intentions or the effectiveness of their means is to risk being ostracized. Some sense trouble coming when the individual matters less than the group. The riot isn't far behind. This is one of the reasons why the Orthodox Church had to be suppressed, by the way, in Russia by the communists. Because true Christianity encourages the individual, and it encourages an individual relationship with your maker. And it is completely antithetical to collectivism. And this is why classical liberalism comes out of that ideology. And again, make no mistake, fascists are collectivists. Socialists are also collectivist, and so are communists. They are one and the same. Two sides of the same coin. The coin being socialism, the sides being fascism and communism. So, the politics of fear. Let's see, let's read that again. How it manipulates us into tribalism. This is from Psychology Today. It says the cruel murder of 50 people in New Zealand was another tragic reminder of how humans are capable of the heartlessly killing their own kind just based on what they believe, how they worship, and what race or nationality they belong to. This is a long-standing history of fear of the others, turning humans into illogical, ruthless weapons in service of an ideology. Now, if you read anything about the Christchurch shooter, if you read the manifesto, if you know anything about this other than what the media has spun in your head, he was a left-winger. He was an eco-terrorist. He believed that global warming was going to destroy the earth and all the people, and he attacked Muslims because Muslims tend to have large families, and he wanted to depopulate the earth. This had nothing to do with any sort of right-wing ideology or nationalism, for that matter. The guy wasn't from New Zealand. He was Australian. Fear is arguably as old as life. It is deeply ingrained in the living organism that have survived extinction through billions of years of evolution. Demigods have always used fear for intimidation of the subordinates or enemies and the shepherding the tribe by the leaders. Fear is a very strong tool that can blur human logic and change their behavior. We learn fear from tribe mates. Like other animals, we humans can learn fear from experience, such as being attacked by predators, also from observation, such as witnessing a predator attack another human. And we learn by instructions, such as being told there is a predator nearby. So you can read this whole thing, but I've talked about this whole series is about fear. And these people rule by fear, literal terrorism. And what is going on here, and the media does the same thing. What is going on with the media? Well, the reason why you don't know that the Christchurch shooter was actually an eco-terrorist, that he was a left-winger, is because he was demonized by the media, because the media always points to the right, and the middle ground of the right, that would be the neocons, the middle ground that is between the neolibs and the neocons, they don't care. And the reason why they don't care is because they still have their power and their prestige. So they allow the media to say whatever slanderous things they want to about the right, unless there's actually someone who may be racist within their midst or something like that. And then they always excise them. The left, on the other hand, they don't care either. They just keep propping up their people. Just literally keep propping up their people. And the people who are the neolibs, who are in power and control, like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, don't understand that they are going to lose their power very soon. They will be one of the first to get the guillotine when these Bolsheviks, and we are in the middle of a sort of cold/hot Bolshevik revolution, civil war of the United States. And I'm sorry, people, it's been brewing for years. For about 8 years now, especially the last 4. So this is from Business Insider. 2020, the year when 4 long-term economic threats will accumulate. This was written on February 18th, 2011. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole article, but these predictions that there would be calamity in 2020 have been accurate, and part of it is based on economics and history and the study of certain repeating patterns. It says 4 long wave cycles will likely intersect around 2020-2022. Longtime corresponding Ken R. asked me to elaborate on one of my recent references to real crisis being pushed forward in 2020, a 5-year scenario. So this whole article is actually quite exceptional. Here's a little graph talking about intersection of 4 long-term cycles. So we see the Civil War here of 1861, and then 80 years, 1941, we had World War II, we had a generational cycle, peak oil extraction depletion. Now, peak oil is probably nonsense as far as my estimation goes, because they've been talking about peak oil since the 70s, and it hasn't happened yet. In fact, we seem to be doing really, really well with oil. Price inflation, wage stagnation cycle. Now, that has happened because we keep doing quantitative easing, which is just a way to essentially devalue your money and allow the federal government to spend money up front. But you have a credit bubble in the 1920s. Not really. The market crash then was minor, and because the government didn't get involved, it recovered immediately. debt renunciation, depression, war, credit expansion. And then it says 2021 crisis. So it goes through these things: peak oil, the cycle of credit, generational cycle, the 100-year cycle, and then there's more. More interesting, Vice had this, I believe was 2012. It says 2012 is BS. 2020 is when we'll really be in trouble. And scientist Peter Turchin's work suggests that the next state of upheaval in the United States is set to hit in 2020 based on historical violent cycles. This was published October 30th, 2012. So it's an interview with him, and he essentially says that, this is based on actual theoretical works that have, a study of essentially economics and history. Time magazine picked this back up just recently. This research predicts 2020 would be mayhem. Here's what he says may come next. So this was June 16th, 2020. Not everyone took Peter Turchin seriously a decade ago when he said widespread civil unrest would sweep through the U.S. in 2020. They had no reason to believe I wasn't crazy, said Turchin, a 63-year-old researcher who teaches cultural evolution at the University of Connecticut. In 2010, after analyzing historical cycles of instability, Turchin made a prediction that was published at the time in the Journal of Nature. America will suffer a period of major social upheaval beginning around 2020. So, it talks about the pandemic and record unemployment, which we didn't have record unemployment. We had record low unemployment and the best economy that anybody has seen in generations. Before this, fake coof thing. I'm not saying the coof isn't real. I'm saying that the fakeness is how intense it is. So here is the Wall Street Journal. It says, virus, unemployment, riots. When shock multiplies, the effects usually last. At crisis points in the nation's history, as 1968 and 1979, Americans sometimes change course. So this article is about the tipping point. When does a country reach a tipping point? A point when the citizenry concludes that things are simply spinning out of control and that something different is required. Well, let's look at this. What's spinning out of control here? The expansion of government. What's spinning out of control here? Propaganda media. What's spinning out of control here? Riots in the streets that politicians, local politicians, refuse to do anything about. The Spectator, USA, Antifa's American Insurgents. Go check this out. This is from May 30th, 2020, by Andy Ngo. Andy Ngo being probably the foremost expert on Antifa. And Antifa, the extreme anarchist communist movement, has riding down to an art. They first broke windows the first broken windows is the blood and the water for looters to move in. When the looting is done, they carry flammable chemicals to start fires to finish the job. Footage recorded in Minneapolis and other cities show militants dressed in black bloc. We talked about that, the black bloc, right? The Antifa uniform, wielding weapons like hammers or sticks to smash windows. You see their graffiti dubbed as smash up buildings. And FTP, which I'm not going to read what that means, and ACAB, nor I'm going to read what that means either. So this article continues. It talks about the riotings reached the gate of the White House. And again, yesterday, there were shots around the White House. At its core, BLM is a revolutionary Marxist ideology. The founders are self-identified Marxists who make no secret of their worship of communist terrorists and fugitives. They want to abolish the law enforcement and capitalism. They want a regime change and the end of the rule of law. Antifa has partnered with Black Lives Matter for now to help accelerate the breakdown of society. See, this was happening because our leaders are doing nothing. In fact, the only leader that is doing anything is the president. So this is from City Journal, Eye on the News, Darkness Falls, the collapse of the rule of law across the country, intensified by Antifa radicals, is terrifying. Heather McDonald, May 31st, 2020, same date. Savagery is spreading with lightning speed across the United States, with murderous assaults on police officials and civilians, and static annihilation of businesses and symbols of the state. So you can go again and read this for your own. I need to keep moving. I have more to present here. Washington Post, major U.S. cities gripped with crisis, now facing spike and deadly shootings, including of children. Remember that Ian Miles Chung tweet I showed you with the 5-year-old that was murdered the other day? It's just so sad and so pathetic, people. July 6, 2020. Like, if you aren't voting these people out, God help you. God help your mind. New York Post, murder is rising, but New York doesn't seem to care. June 15, 2020. Well, de Blasio just claimed the other day that they're going to be buying up a bunch of buildings, so maybe he's doing it for himself, right? Here's Vox being laughable from August 3rd. That murder spike in the U.S. big cities explained. Murders are up in big cities this summer. Here are 7 possible reasons why. And the first thing they say is, we know less about why there might be a spike, but there are some theories. So why did homicides increase in cities? This is Vox being the insane left-wing idiots and coverers that they are. They know exactly what's going on. Let's see. They got pandemic has really messed things up. No, that's part of it, because people are out of work and they're tired of being locked down. That definitely contributed. But how about depolicing led to more violence? You know, again, we know less about why there might be a spike. No, we know plenty of why there's a spike. Lack of trust in police led to more violence. No. Antifa and BLM led to more violence. Lack of trust of belief of the police had to do with propaganda, media propaganda specifically, because it's not statistically supported. More guns led to more gun violence. Nope. Sorry, more guns were sold, but there is no evidence whatsoever that having more guns in the hands of law-abiding citizens has anything to do with the people committing murders in the streets. Overwhelmed hospitals led to more deaths. Maybe in those urban areas. I doubt it, though. Idle hands led to more violence. Yeah, like people not standing up for their rights or the government. A bad economy led to more violence. Well, there wasn't a bad economy. The economy was purposefully tanked. Again, from the Wall Street Journal, violent crime surges in Atlanta amid raising unemployment, tensions over policing, shooting which included the killing of an 8-year-old girl, raised sharply. This is July 20th. Wall Street Journal, homicide spike hits most large cities. Says double-digit increase in 36 of the 50 biggest cities amid pandemic. This was August 2nd, 2020. Why is this? Because you have radicals in the street who are causing an insurrection, and you have people that are sympathizing with this insurrection. And you have people who are being cowardly and not standing up against this insurrection. Mayhem continues. Protest narrative crumbles. Looters rampage in Chicago, and arson returns in Portland. Well, Portland is like 73 or 74 days into riots now. I saw Tim Pool talking about the other night that he started seeing Chicago. He's from Chicago. He talked to family, and they're like, there's been rioting here ever from the beginning. It's never stopped. That was published yesterday on August 10th. Now, here's another thing to really be worried about. Small businesses are dying by the thousands, and no one is tracking the carnage. This is by Bloomberg. August 11th, that was today. They simply close down and never show up in bankruptcies. More than half of owners are worried that their firm won't survive. So, big companies are going bankrupt at record pace, but only part of the carnage. By some accounts, small businesses are disappearing by the thousands amid the COVID pandemic. Now, for all of you people who are out there rioting, who are out there burning down businesses, who are looting as as reparations and destroying these businesses that will not necessarily be covered by insurance, for all you people doing these things, think about this. Whose hands are going to have the authority and the power to buy out these businesses or these buildings? Is it going to be the everyday common man? Or is it going to be the rich, elite billionaires that you hate so much because you're jealous of their success? This wave of silent failures goes uncounted in part because real-time data on small business is notoriously scarce and because owners of small firms often have no debt and thus no need for bankruptcy court. This is this is a huge deal, people. Again, this is about what we should actually be afraid of, not the coup, not the Trump presidency. But we're going to get into that right now from Project Veritas.
Free speech has repercussions.
So if Trump gets reelected, what?
Cities burn. The only thing that fascists understand is violence. So the only way that you can confront them is with violence. It's a directive from Bernie that we can't attack Warren.
I think it's also fair to point out that when we were in Moscow, for example, people here also were extremely impressed by their public transportation system.
Meet Kyle Jurek, a field...
All right, you guys can check that out for yourself. That was back in January. If Trump gets elected, cities will burn. Here's a quote from the Gulag Archipelago. A human being became a vessel of fear, subjugated to it. And it turned out that the least dangerous form of existence was constant betrayal. In a situation of fear and betrayal over many years, people survive unharmed only in a superficial bodily sense. And inside, they become corrupt. That's right. You become a person who will snitch on your neighbors. You know, you'll tell on Anne Frank, Harriet Tubman. You'll expose the Underground Railroad. Don't you dare claim that you are a moral person if you are involved with any of these ideologies. And I mean, even in the slightest. You need to re-examine your life.
Like, free speech has repercussions.
So if Trump gets reelected, what?
Cities burn. The only thing that fascists understand is violence.
Let's jump to here.
By being kept from sleeping for a week, by thirst, and by being beaten to a bloody pulp.
He's talking about how the gulags were because this gentleman decided to say, well, he's not a gentleman, this commie scum, the slaver, decided to say, well, the gulags weren't that bad.
So that was the intention of gulags, right? It's like not only to remove the people that were like insidious to the state from the state, like, hey, you guys are all causing problems. You're like working against the revolution. We're just going to remove you and put you in Siberia, where you learn the fucking value of like being a comrade. Like, I mean, and that's like, you know, that's what it has to be. Like, our prisons in the United States right now are far worse than anything that.
This guy's a joke. No, they're not. I used to work as a correctional officer. I know plenty of people that work in the prison system. I'm not saying they're great or anything, but they're not gulags by any means. And I mean, this guy has no idea.
They experienced in gulag. Like, people get raped. People fucking work 12 hours a day. People have to go fight fires in California for $1. You know what I mean? Like, that's fucked up. That's super fucked up. Yeah. The Soviet Union didn't do that shit. Like,
no, they did just far worse things, actually.
You're not gonna get Bernie to say gulags, but like, I'm all aboard for gulags. Like, I feel as though there needs to be re-education for a significant portion of our society.
I think he is too.
mean, but you can't, running for president in the United States, you can't say anything like that, right?
Well, and then like you said, I mean, if people don't want to get on board, it's, you know, you were saying that the gulags are better than whatever.
Putting them against the wall.
Yeah.
And the alternative, instead of like trying to like re-educate these people and put them back into society, the only other alternative is to you know what I mean?
Bernie Sanders calls himself a democratic socialist, but...
All right. So there is a part 3 to this.
I'm ready to start tearing bricks up. I'm going to learn how to shoot and go train. I'm ready for the revolution. What Bernie did was he inspired people and he created a movement that started to flood Washington.
Like, free speech has repercussions.
So if Trump gets reelected, what?
Cities burn.
I think it's also fair to point out that when we were in Moscow, for example, people here also were extremely impressed by their public transportation system.
What a joke.
The Soviet Union was not horrible. I always said, you know, I'm a communist.
The Soviet Union was not horrible. I have some friends that grew up under communist Soviet Russia that would say differently. I have quite a few friends.
I'll straight up get armed and leave it to the Soviets to make the most badass, most effective gun in the world. The destroyer of imperialism and colonization.
Okay, the destroyer of imperialism and colonization. What do you think Bolshevism is? The Bolshevik Revolution is about, and Stalinism is about bringing about a world communist global order. Is that not imperialism and colonialism? Just idiots.
Well, at least he's right about something. The AK-47.
All right, James being James. Let's see what this.
So if Trump gets reelected, what?
Cities burn.
I'll straight up.
Next two subjects of our undercover investigation of extreme radicalism inside the Sanders campaign.
I canvassed with someone who's like an anarchist, and I canvassed with someone who's, you know, more of a Marxist-Leninist, and so we do it. I mean, we attract you know, radical, like truly radical people to the campaign, but that's obviously not like outward-facing sort of.
Right. And Bernie, does he know that?
Well, I think the goal is just to build a build a coalition of people, and a lot of those people who do that kind of work are you know, their politics fall well outside of the American sort of norm. So they're Marxist-Leninists, they're anarchists, they're these types of folks, and they have more of a mind for direct action, for engaging in politics outside of the electoral system.
Like here we think of, you know,
all right. Now, direct action, meaning that they're willing to be violent, period. So this was recent. Those other ones were from back in like January. Please go check them out. This is more recent. We warned you. This was June 2nd.
I'm an anarcho-communist.
Pretty much anarcho-syndicalism.
There's a lot of me's in the Bernie campaign. Bernie doesn't get the nomination in Milwaukee with word.
I mean, we attract truly radical people.
I walk into that MSNBC studios, drag those motherfuckers up by their hair, and light them on fire in the streets.
I'm ready to start tearing bricks up and start fighting.
It's going to take militancy.
I'm already on Twitter following numerous groups around the country that are ready to organize.
Like Antifa, yellow vests, all that, but keeping that in the back burner for right now.
I'll straight up get armed. I want to learn how to shoot and go train.
I canvassed with someone who's an anarchist.
I'm an anarcho-communist. I'm as far to the left as you can possibly get.
I canvassed with someone who's more of a...
An anarcho-communist would never commit violence toward people because that's not anarchism. That's called being totalitarian. That's tyranny.
Marxist-Leninist.
I'm a communist that believes in pretty much anarcho-syndicalism.
Gulags are actually meant for like
re-education.
A lot of the stories we're told in the United States about the Gulag are exaggerated.
Our prisons in the United States right now are far worse.
We have more people in prison in this country right now.
That's kind of what Bernie's like, hey, free education.
Guess who did prison reform, sentence reform? Donald J. Trump. How about that? You know, I want that myself. I want to get rid of the drug war. I think the drug war causes far more problems than it ever solved.
For everybody, because we're going to have to teach you not to be a Nazi.
What will help is when we send all the Republicans to the re-education.
Greatest way to break a billionaire, go out and break rocks for 12 hours a day. You're now a working class person.
Let's force them to build.
The problem these idiots don't understand is you'll never get to that billionaire because they will be in political power and you will have been put up against the wall as the useful idiot. You don't understand that the billionaires will hire private security that are actually trained, not going out pretending, LARPing, and shooting guns thinking they know what to do. Training like I actually had, like how to kick down doors and take down buildings. I mean, these guys have no freaking clue. Now, this is from the National Pulse. Here is, again, I'm not even going to read this article, but racist Cambridge professor insists white lives don't matter, calls to abolish whiteness. We keep hearing about this. These are the real things to be concerned with, people. The real things. See, there seems to be this weird notion that you can't be racist toward a white person because, you know, white people are just inherently evil and did everything wrong and blah, 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 blah. No, that's ahistorical. That is not correct. Let's go here to the Washington Post. Thank you, Washington Post, for publishing this because you're normally garbage. Yes, Antifa is the moral equivalent of neo-Nazis, and they are. A group of neo-communist Antifa, anti-fascist thugs attacked peaceful protesters at a No to Marxism and America rally, wielding sticks and pepper spray and beating people with homemade shields that read, I kid you not, no hate. Man, it's insanity. That was August 30th, 2017. So that was a few years old, but they are the moral equivalent. Here from the Post-Millennial. United Nations comes out and supports Antifa. What? June 20th. Now, they may have, I guess they did. I should have checked ahead of time. They may have pulled that tweet. Well, I know they pulled a tweet, but I mean, I guess they didn't have it screenshotted. But here, UN deleted tweet supporting Antifa per public backlash. Right? That was on the 21st, the very next day. These globalist organizations that groups like Facebook, Twitter, Google, and YouTube, well, YouTube is Google, are propping up. They put up this tweet because they themselves want global communism. And maybe that's another thing I'll do in the near future is a deep dive on the UN and what they are actually about and their deep corruption. This is from The Verge. Massive Twitter hack could be a global security crisis. This was July 15th. Reuters, June 18th, 2020. Exclusive massive spying on users of Google Chrome show new security weakness. A newly discovered spyware effort attacked users through 32 million downloads of extensions of Google's market-leading Chrome web browser, researchers at Awake Security told Reuters, highlighting the tech industry's failure to protect browsers as they are used more for email, payroll, and other sensitive functions. Now, these are probably hacks from China. Recently, August 5th, YouTube bans almost 2,600 Chinese channels for influence operations. Some of the channels posted content about racial justice protests in the United States. Now, if you go back to my Black Lives Matter video, you will see that the Chinese talk about inviting them in, inviting the Antifa in. What is going on here, people? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of some virus that has a 99.8% or more survival rate depending on your age group? Are you worried about the president so much who wants to get out of these globalist organizations? How about your livelihood or your children? How about being free? From the Wall Street Journal, TikTok tracked user data using tactic banned by Google. This was August 11th. TikTok being from Huawei So here it says U.S. officials using Huawei tech opens doors to Chinese spying censorship. And it says the closest U.S. ally, Britain, disagrees with U.S., warning that any use of Huawei's technology exposes a country to digital espionage, except for, this was February 14th, 2020, except for, we know the Chinese steal your intellectual property all of the time. Do you really want them to have your information? Now, here recently, I'm sure you know, the president has essentially banned TikTok or wants it to break ties with the Chinese company. Maybe you are not aware, though, on August 9th, 2020, that there was this giant Reddit hack. And it was crazy stuff. It was broken, bad English, and it was like praise for Trump and some other stuff. I don't know. But what I do know is that
Joe Biden ran for president in 1988. And I remember this.
Supposed to be your solution. By the way, I made a video the other week, lazy video, because I just came back from vacation, of YouTubers, and Jimmy's pretty big, but check out Jimmy Dore. I said I didn't really have a lot of left-wing YouTubers. He is left-wing. I disagree with many of his positions, but he's pretty good also at being truthful.
Because I was in college. It was a year before I started comedy. And this is before the internet.
Yeah,
and the guy had to drop out.
The guy who beat him in '88 went on to do great, though, right?
Oh, the caucus. Watch this.
Candidate Joseph Biden today faces a controversy. 3 weeks ago, at a debate at the Iowa State Fair, he used phrases identical to those delivered by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
Biden seemed to be claiming Kinnock's vision and life as his own.
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Gladys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations?
If you don't think that Joe Biden, this is years ago, is a puppet politician, you are a fool.
To be able to get the university.
My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania don't come up after 12 hours and play football.
8 hours underground and then come up and play football.
It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
There was no platform upon which they could stand.
The notion that every thought or notion or idea you'd have to go back and find and attribute to someone, I think is, quite frankly, ludicrous.
The problem here is that Senator Biden...
By the way, look at his speech patterns and how clear and precise he is compared to nowadays. And supposedly, I mean, Biden's been a gaffe machine forever, but supposedly he has no cognitive decline.
Biden told his audience he'd just been thinking about these things, and he failed to give any credit at all to his famous British speechwriter.
So this is the guy they want to run against Trump because Trump's such a big liar.
Right. And if you notice back in the day, the media, they were good. They actually covered people more objectively. We don't have that anymore. We just have propaganda. Skip ahead a little bit here.
Behind the words, what's there? And a lot of people, the rap on Biden has always been that it's just a surface.
I should have said, to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, it's the only time I didn't, and all the times I've ever used it.
But CBS News found a tape of a second instance.
It reappeared in the New York Times with a new charge, that Biden had appropriated a famous litany from the late Robert Kennedy about what the gross national product cannot measure.
It cannot measure the health of our children.
The health of our children.
The quality of our education.
The quality of their education.
The joy of their play.
Or the joy of their play.
Biden gave Kennedy no credit. He has also quoted or paraphrased John Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock, all without credit.
Joseph Biden admitted today that he committed plagiarism when he was in law school. He said it was a mistake, but that it was unintentional.
This is the guy they're running against Trump because he's so corrupt.
What do you think he's going to steal from Boris Johnson before this is all over? What do you think he's going to...
Committed plagiarism in law school.
Guys, watch the rest of this on your own. Biden has no ethics. It's just about power. I don't think that Trump is a super ethical individual, but I do know this. He is, he's a patriot. He wants American unity, sovereignty. He wants America to be strong. He wants America to get away from this globalism. And he seems to want to break this terrible stronghold of globalists within the U.S. government, the deep state, the people that could care less about you and only about their power. So here, a briefer clip from, what was this? The Intercept.
Why does Joe Biden make so much stuff up? And will it hurt him against Trump in the general election? There's much talk online, especially among Bernie Sanders supporters, about whether Joe Biden is in cognitive decline, whether he has dementia, why he's so incoherent. Now, I'm no doctor. I'm not going to make a medical diagnosis. Apart from to say that in terms of his speech and his memory, there's clearly undeniably been a lot of decline in recent years.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate.
But today, forget the weird stuff that Biden says that doesn't make any sense.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Forget all of that, though, and focus on his falsehoods. The fact that he just makes stuff up, that he does seem to be a fabulist. Here are just 5 examples. Number 1, his arrest in apartheid South Africa. The former vice president said 3 times during the month of February alone that he got arrested trying to see Nelson Mandela in prison.
I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
Except it's a lie. Biden himself was forced to fess up on CNN.
When I said arrested, I meant I was not able to move. Cops, Afrikaners would not let me go with them, made me stay where I was. I guess I wasn't arrested, I was stopped.
To be clear, he didn't misspeak, he didn't misremember, it wasn't a gaffe, it was a lie. And a really bad one, because he even claimed at one point last month that Mandela later thanked him for getting arrested. Number 2, there's the silver star that never was. Over the years, Biden has told a moving but false war story in speeches and at rallies. He did it in New Hampshire last August.
This guy climbed down a ravine, carried this guy up on his back under fire, and the general wanted me to pin the silver star on him. I got up there and stand and said, God's truth, my word is a Biden. He stood at attention.
Which means absolutely nothing.
I don't want the damn thing. Do not pin it on me, sir. Please, sir. Do not do that. He died. He died.
He didn't pin the medal on the guy, who wasn't a Navy captain. He just made it up. And Biden has told this story time and again over the years, changing the details in it ever so slightly on each occasion. So sorry, it's not a gaffe. It's pure misrepresentation. Tricked him.
I made a mistake. I said it 14 years ago. I trusted George Bush to keep his word. He said he was not going to go into Iraq.
Except Biden was calling for war with Saddam Hussein in 1998.
The only way we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and it's going to require guys like you in uniform to be back on foot in the desert, taking taking Saddam down.
He also says now that he opposed the Iraq war as soon as it started.
From the moment shock and awe started, from that moment, I was opposed to the effort and I was outspoken.
A complete fabrication. Here he is several months after the invasion began, praising both the war and George Bush.
Some of my own party have said that it was a mistake to go to Iraq in the first place. But the cost of not acting against Saddam, I think, would have been much greater. The President of the United States is a bold leader, and he is popular.
Again, Biden...
All right, guys. So, one last thing. This is from CNBC. U.S. intelligence report on Trump-Biden election meddling reveals who Russia, China, and Iran want to win. Now, this was August 7th, so this just came out. Russia is trying to undermine presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden's candidacy. Why? Because Donald Trump isn't friendly with Russia, but he's not aggressive toward them. So that would make sense. But China and Iran want President Trump to lose the election. Why? Well, because President Trump has actually been non-aggressive toward them, but firm. Very firm. Need I remind you, too, that Trump opened relations with North Korea in a way like no other president has. So, again, I'll tell you all the time, I'm not a huge Trump fan, but man, he's done some good stuff compared these legacy candidates. Joe Biden's a puppet candidate, people. He is nothing more than that. If you want to stay out of war, if you want a strong America, if you want a future, you think Joe Biden's going to stop these riots? I mean, maybe they'll magically go away, but I have a feeling that they won't. And I do believe that, if Trump wins, there'll be more rioting. But hey, it's been 2 months and they haven't stopped yet. So let's look at something real quick. Lastly, is the Chinese social credit system. And I think that a lot of people like this. So this was printed last year, but this is just a visual graphic of it. And it shows, the game of life. Citizens gain points by donating blood or money, engaging in charitable work, praising the government or social media, helping the poor. They lose credit by not visiting one's parents regularly, cheating in online games, insincere apologies, crimes committed, spreading the rumors on internets. So, but who gets to dictate what those rumors are or what is true? This is an insane thing. It's been in practice for a while in China. I've talked about it years ago. Of course, I didn't have a YouTube channel then. But it says fast-tracking work promotion, priority status for children and school administration, easier access to bank loans, tax breaks, exclusion from booking flights, ineligible for certain jobs, restricted access, public shaming and TV via social media. Now, a lot of people talk about the Black Mirror episode. By the way, this is on the Visual Capitalist if you're looking for it. And the relevance of this to that one particular episode where there's basically a social credit score. And it is a very, very similar idea. So unless you want that, unless you want the woke code, unless you want to be policed, unless you want to be told what to thought, unless you want to be part of the collective, unless you want no personal identity, unless you want a state that allows itself to be destroyed and ruled by, by totalitarian thugs in the streets, unless you want globalism, unless you want all those other things, then you might want to consider not supporting these things, standing up, speaking out, and maybe casting your ballot for people who will. And I think our president is the guy right now. He's a bull in a china shop, and he was probably very, very needed. It took me a long time to completely come around to the idea. I wasn't really sure. The only other option would be super conspiratorial. They're doing all this on purpose. Donald Trump is some secret shill, and they're doing it so he will get reelected. I think it's more likely that they don't know what to do to keep him from being reelected, and they see this loss of grasp of their own power. But either way, I wanted to talk about these things that we should be actually concerned about today, and I don't think I don't know. Neo-Nazis, whatever. I don't know anybody that is a avowed racist, or if people I've met in my life who are, they're not organized. They're not rioting in the streets. The propaganda media will tell you that, oh, it's white supremacists doing this. Well, it is. They're called Antifa. But, that's a perspective. So with all that, I'm Bill. This has been AllMinucOne. Please, if you stayed this long, like, share, and subscribe. I know it's a long journey, but there's a lot of stuff to cover in the world, and this is just how I do it. So, again, like, share, subscribe, and you all be well.